Hello, this is Keeping New York History Alive, and I am Bonnie Wood. We're on letter 2, number 2 from Christian Schultz Jr. and his travels on an inland voyage. (1807 to 1808). Lake Ontario, Oswego, July 24th, 1807. This is the title page from the book. And here is our author, Christian Schultz Jr. And this is a clip from the beginning of the book, and it explains what is going to happen in letter number 2. And of course, there is a link to the ebook here. I highly recommend that you take the link to Satori that is in YouTube and use that. When you use that, you can get enlargements. You have links to every one of the images that are here included in the presentation, and also a link to the ebook. So it's very user-friendly. Table of distances, and as you know, he mentioned last time from New York to Albany, we went to Schenectady, Fort Hunter, Canandaigua, Little Falls. Now we're in Utica, and we'll continue here through these locations, and you can see the miles, total miles, latitude and longitude here. And then letter number 3, we're going to be at the salt works in Salina, so that's something to look forward to. Dear friend, my last, I think, left me moralizing in consequence of my disappointments in fishing on the Mohawk. I shall not say another word upon that subject, for, to be candid, the first glorious nibble I afterward had banished all unpleasant ideas respecting the past. At Utica, I made some little improvements in our boat, which consisted of an awning sufficiently large to secure us pretty comfortably from the rain and sun. The passage from Utica to this place, a distance of 114 miles, occupied 9 days, 2 of which, however, were spent at Three River Point in waiting for me, as I had resolved not to miss the opportunity of visiting the famous salt works of Onondaga. The freight to this place is at the rate of $1.25 per hundred. The passage money, if any is charged, is about $2 for 100 miles. Finding your own provisions. But if you furnish a good table, no passage money will be received, and these open-hearted fellows always seem much pleased to have gentlemen for passengers. Rome, which lies in latitude 43 degrees north and 75 degrees west, is situated near the head of the Mohawk, 16 miles above Utica. The entrance into this village is through a handsome canal about a mile in length. It is here that the Mohawk is made to contribute a part of its stream toward filling Wood Creek, which, of itself, is so low in dry seasons as to be totally insufficient to float a boat without the aid of the Mohawk. Rome, formerly known as Fort Stanwix, is delightfully situated in an elevated and level country, commanding an extensive view for about 10 miles around. This village consists at present of about 80 houses, but it seems quite destitute of every kind of trade, and rather upon the decline. The only spirit which I perceived stirring among them was that of money digging, and the old fort betrayed evident signs of the prevalence of this mania, as it had literally been turned inside out for the purpose of discovering concealed treasure. In proceeding from the Mohawk through the canal into Wood Creek and descending the same, you pass through another range of locks, 5 in number. The toll here is still higher than the first, being $3 per ton for goods, and from $1.50 to $3.50 extra upon each boat. This charge is usually paid by the boatman, who takes the freight but I am informed that it is necessary to come to an understanding on this point at the time of making the contract, as this expense is sometimes thrown upon the shipper. Wood Creek is a narrow, crooked, and sluggish stream, about 24 miles in length from its head at Rome to its junction with the Onondaga River, and about 12 yards wide after passing through the locks. It winds through a low, swampy tract of country from 8 to 10 miles in length and 4 or 5 in breadth. Although this stream is celebrated for the size, activity, and numbers of its poshatos, as well as the stagnancy of its waters, yet I neither experience the annoyance of the one nor the inconvenience of the other, although I passed it in the month of July, when both these evils are said to be intolerable. Just after passing the storehouse, which is situated below the last lock, a considerably rapid stream, called Canada Creek, unites with Wood Creek from the right. This is nearly as large as the former, but not navigable. Immediately opposite their junction are the remains of Fort Rickey, a fortress of some consequence during the old Indian Wars, but at present employed to a better purpose, being covered with a good orchard. About a mile farther, we pass the site of another old fort, called Fort Bull. This is on the right bank of the creek. The navigation of Wood Creek is not attended with any hazard of drowning, or even of staving a boat to pieces, but the sudden turns of the stream, overhung with the trunks and branches of trees, are not without their dangers, as I experienced. The boat being under considerable way, at a sudden bend of the river, we unexpectedly discovered a tree which had been overturned by some late storm, stretched across the stream, and supported by its branches in such a manner as not to touch the water. Our captain, immediately perceiving that it would be impossible to stop the boat in so short a distance, directed everyone to take care of himself, and ran the boat under a part of the tree of sufficient height to admit it. But as it was much lumbered up amidships, several of the articles were swept overboard. Amongst these were my traveling trunk and portable desk, containing my money, papers, and apparel. The desk floated alongside, but the trunk, being very heavy, sunk to the level of the water and stopped against some of the branches. As it required some time, however, to stop the boat and go up the stream, the trunk, on being taken up, was full of water, to the no little injury of my papers and clothing. The most laughable circumstance attending this accident was, that on missing my companion and looking round for him, I discovered him in the top of the tree, which we had passed under, whither he had jumped to avoid being crushed, as he had not time to get aft, where the boat was less lumbered. There is great plenty and a variety of fresh fish, fine fish, in this stream. And as we are now provided with the necessary cooking apparatus, I find, for the first time, my favorite amusement likely to be attended with profit. We have already seen several salmon jumping, but have not been able to catch any, except with a silver hook. Nor should we, probably, have so soon been successful in this way had we not fortunately fallen in with a party of Oneida Indians, who were returning from fishing and had 2 canoes loaded with fine salmon. Several of them weighed 30 pounds each. We purchased 2 of the largest for $1.25. We stopped the same evening at a settlement a little distance above the mouth of Wood Creek, in order to obtain a fresh supply of milk for our coffee and chocolate. The sun had just set as we were ascending the bank, when we heard the cry of a hog in distress, and upon approaching the house, found it was occasioned by a bear, who had come upon much the same errand with ourselves, namely, to get something to eat. But as he found no one with whom to make a bargain, he very deliberately seized a small hog of about 300 pounds weight and marched off into the woods. By the time we came to the house, we discovered an old woman with a frying pan in one hand and a ladle in the other, running after the robber. But she soon returned and informed us that this was the second time the darnation devil had visited them within a week. Wood Creek is joined on the right by Fish Creek, which, with more propriety, might be denominated a river, as it is at least 5 times as large as Wood Creek, but navigable for 10 miles only. This stream is much resorted to by the Oneida Indians on account of the great quantities of salmon and other fish which it affords, as likewise from its being favored with numerous springs of excellent water, which in this country is considered as a very great luxury. About 1.5 miles below the mouth of Fish Creek, the collected waters of these 2 streams are discharged into the Oneida Lake, where are still to be seen the remains of Fort Royal, formerly a post of considerable importance in checking the roving parties of Indians on this part of the frontier. Oneida Lake is a most charming and beautiful sheet of water, about 30 miles in length and 5 in breadth, and I believe affords the best and greatest variety of fish of any water in the western part of this state. I have seen salmon, pike, and catfish taken in this lake from 5 to 35 pounds weight, and chub, Oswego bass, and white bass from 2 to 5 pounds. Besides, a great variety of smaller and less esteemed fish. Eels are found here in the greatest abundance and are the finest and largest that ever I saw. They have an invention for taking them similar to our eel pots, but made very large and requiring no bait. These are always set in a strong current, either at the inlet or outlet of a lake, or on some swift part of the stream upon the rivers. 2 ridges of stones are piled up in the manner before described on the Mohawk River, at the lower end of which the pot or basket is set. I was present when one of the baskets, which had been set overnight, was taken up. It filled 2 barrels, and the greater part of the eels weighed from 2 to 3 pounds each. I have been always prejudiced against eating eels on account of a rancid taste which I perceived in them. But being prevailed upon to taste of these, I must declare that I never before tasted any fish so delicious, without excepting even the salmon. A family who live at the outlet of this lake depend almost entirely upon this eel fishery for their support. They salt down about 40 barrels a year and find a ready sale for them at $10 a barrel. The Oneida Indians, from whom this lake derives its name, are generally settled in this neighborhood. We had occasionally met with 1 or 2 families of them previously to our arrival at the lake, but here we found a collection of about 40 who were amusing themselves with shooting arrows, pitching quoits, and throwing large stones. We made a stop here for the night and found them all remarkably civil and well disposed. There is a tolerably good tavern kept at this place by a Mrs. J. and her sister, a young woman, who, you may be assured, display no ordinary degree of courage in dealing out whiskey to 30 or 40 Indians, who generally rendezvous at this place, especially as there is no other white settler within sight or call, should any accident render immediate assistance necessary. I made a small excursion along the border of this lake, and, although the shore was low, yet I found a firm, dry, white sandy beach to walk upon. Some other parts of it, however, I was informed were low and swampy. I was much amused in the evening by a singular illumination upon the lake, which I was at first wholly unable to account for. The water at this part of the lake, it seems, is very shallow, for nearly half a mile from the shore, and being perfectly transparent, and the bottom a white sand, the smallest object may be readily distinguished. The Indians have a method of taking salmon and other fish by means of an iron frame fixed in the bow of the canoe, projecting forward 3 or 4 feet and elevated about 5. Upon this they kindle a bright fire of pine knots, and while one person sits in the stern with a paddle to impel the boat forward, another stands in the bow with a sharp spear ready to strike the fish who play about the light. 10 or 12 of these canoes, moving about irregularly on the lake on a fine, calm evening, with the reflection of their lights, like so many lines of fire, extending from each object to a center on which you stand, afford a most pleasing prospect, and far exceed, in my opinion, the most brilliant display of artificial fireworks. In crossing this lake, we were fortunate enough to be favored with a fair wind, and 5 hours sailing brought us to the outlet, or head, of Onondaga River. On our passage, we had a tolerably fair view of Rotterdam, situated on the right bank of the lake, about 6 miles above the outlet. The country generally around the lake, and particularly in the neighborhood of Rotterdam, has the character of being unhealthy, although the situation of the town appeared to me to be sufficiently elevated. Should the vicinity of these low and swampy grounds be the only cause of this unhealthiness, I am of opinion that a few $100s expended in opening the channel and removing the bar at the head of the outlet would lower the lake so far as to drain off the stagnant waters and thus remove the cause. I had an opportunity of examining the whole length of the bar by wading across it, and found it composed of loose stones and gravel, with no more than 18 inches of water. Unless, therefore, there should prove to be a bed of rocks to impede the undertaking, I am inclined to believe that 20 men with the necessary implements might easily accomplish it in the course of a month. As the wind would not permit us to stop at Rotterdam, I can only speak of it from information. It is said to contain about 30 houses, but mostly deserted, on account of what they call the lake fever, which, I am told, makes its appearance annually. There is an excellent set of mills built upon a stream called Bruce's Creek, which passes just below the town, and although the country is extremely fertile, yet, for want of settlers to raise grain, they have but little employment. About 4 miles from the outlet, we pass 2 islands on our left, sufficiently high for cultivation, and containing about 100 acres, but destitute of inhabitants. We also passed a little spot called One Tree Island, which serves the navigators as a landmark, and, at a distance, has the appearance of a ship under sail. These are likewise 2 small sandy islands, generally covered with gulls. The boatmen sometimes stop here to look for eggs, which, in the season, are found in considerable plenty. In passing these islands, we ran aground on the top of what appeared to me to be a sunken island, with a very small flat surface. It was an entire rock, not more than 7 paces across, and on every side we found more than 30 feet water, that being the length of the cord I sounded with. It is astonishing what myriads of small butterflies covered the whole surface of this lake, which, indeed, rather resembled the large fields of an orchard, just spread with the fall of the blossoms. I had remarked that, at the head of the lake, one of the boatmen was directed to fill a keg with water before we started. I inquired for what reason, as the lake was fresh, and there was no danger of our being without water. I was informed that at this season the lake was in blossom, and the water full of fever and ague seeds, therefore not fit to be drank. This I found almost literally true. The cause is as follows. The lake is, in a great measure, bordered with swamps and low grounds, which produce innumerable swarms of small butterflies, especially of the white moth. These insects cannot fly any great distance without resting, and a very light breeze offshore will prevent their regaining the land when once they have taken wing, in consequence of which they soon fall with outspread wings and cover the lake so completely as fully to justify the expression of its being in blossom. Although the water of the lake, before taken up in a glass, appears to be perfectly clear and transparent, yet upon examination it will be found to be full of small particles, which the boatmen call fever and ague seeds, but in reality are the eggs of certain insects. This inconvenience, however, continues only for about 6 weeks, when the waters again become pure and wholesome. In descending the Onondaga River from the outlet, the land is low on both sides for about 5 miles. The right shore then begins gradually to rise and improve in appearance, while the left still continues low for a considerable distance further. This is a pleasant and, in some places, a rapid stream, increasing to the breadth of 125 yards. Its length, according to its meanders from the Oneida Lake to its junction with the Seneca and Oswego rivers at Three River Point, is 20 miles. The navigation of this river is somewhat dangerous on account of several rocky shoals and the rapidity of its current. It therefore requires a particular knowledge of these places in order to take a boat down in safety. Three River Point is most situated on the left bank, at the confluence of the Onondaga, Seneca, and Oswego rivers. Although no town is laid out, as this place at present contains but a single house, yet, I do not hesitate to say, the time will shortly arrive when it will be the site of one of the most respectable inland towns in this part of the state. This tract lies within the military township of Cicero. It belongs to the town and is at present under lease for 6 years. The state would have done well to have reserved this 600-acre lot and had it laid out for a town on a similar plan to that of Oswego, as it must always command a great share of trade, for all the goods bound to or from Oswego must pass by Three River Point, either in ascending or descending, exclusive of the whole trade of the Genesee country by the Seneca River, as well as a salt trade to the upper country, which must also pass this point on its way to the Mohawk. It has likewise nothing to apprehend from any rivalship from settlements on either of the two opposite points, as neither of these possess a sufficient elevation, being subject to be inundated by every rise of the river. Upon our arrival at the point, we found a boat with 34 persons on board, just embarking on a voyage across the lakes to Sandusky, where we heard the Indians were beginning to be troublesome. We should have gone on in company with them, but finding myself within 14 or 16 miles of the famous salt works of Onondaga, I resolved to detain the boat for a couple of days, until I could have an opportunity of visiting this natural curiosity of our country. I accordingly made an offer to our captain, who I have found very kind and obliging, to pay him $6 per day for all the time he should lose. To this he not only assented, but likewise offered to accompany me. After some little trouble, I engaged a couple of men with a canoe, and we set out the same evening, and arrived at the salt works about midnight, a description of which shall be the subject of my next. Yours, C.S. Thank you for viewing this production of Keeping New York History Alive, narrated by me, Bonnie Wood.